anything the United States says in any meeting with China is meaningless. We've watched this play out for years and years now. It doesn't even matter who's in the White House. They say one thing, they do another. You look at the US State Department's official website, US and Taiwan relations, where they talk about the one China policy, recognizing there is only one China. Taiwan is part of it. There's only one legitimate governance, the People's Republic of China. We do not support Taiwan independence. We do not have an embassy in Taiwan because it's not a country. They're admitting all of this out of one side of their mouth. Out of the other side, they're saying we're going to continue arming Taiwan and we're going to continue supporting political parties that are in pursuit of separatism from the rest of China. And what we're watching is a repeat of the same process the US just carried out in Ukraine, where you had Ukraine, which was previously part of the Soviet Union and before that, the Russian Empire. We see them cultivating anti-Russian segments of the population in Ukraine, turning them against their own culture, their own language, their own history, and building up a political party that will irrationally oppose anything Russian, even if it means cutting off themselves economically, politically, and plunging themselves into a military conflict. The exact same thing is now happening in Taiwan. And a lot of people try to make, I think, false comparisons between, say, Crimea and Taiwan. And they say if Crimea can join the Russian Federation, why can't Taiwan pursue independence? And I always point out that we see the United States interfering in Taiwan. This project pushing towards separatism, this is an American project, a project born in Washington and on Wall Street, is part of maintaining and expanding American hegemony around the globe, and more specifically primacy in Asia, and especially over China. It's not a process that benefits the actual people living on Taiwan. And as I pointed out many times before, these US government and arms industry funded think tanks do war games where they say, yes, Taiwan would definitely win in any arms conflict with China as long as we step in and help out. Of course, all infrastructure and industry would be scoured off the surface of Taiwan, but they would keep their political autonomy. And when they say political autonomy, when you really think about that, they don't have any political autonomy. They're part of China, and if they were to separate from China, they would be entirely dependent on the United States economically, militarily, and politically. The DPP itself is a creation of Washington through the National Endowment for Democracy, years and years and years of pumping money into the local Taiwan political landscape, into media, into education. It is entirely artificial, and anything that comes out of it will be completely dependent on the United States. So it is by no means genuine independence. It is simply US-sponsored separatism to create an unsinkable aircraft carrier for the United States right off the coast of mainland China. That is what this is all about. Now, you mentioned the arms package that the US put together. They're actually using the same presidential drawdown authority that the US is using for Ukraine, where they're taking existing weapons in US stockpiles and sending them to Ukraine. They're now doing this for Taiwan. And they're sending things like, in some instances, there's the Patriot air defense system. We can see all the problems that is having in Ukraine. And before that, Saudi Arabia. They are sending anti-ship missiles that have questionable utility. And what was the last thing? The drones, the Reaper drone, an unarmed version of the Reaper drone, which we've already seen fail again in and around Ukraine, in Syria. Now they're going to send these to Taiwan. So what is the purpose of sending weapons that have questionable utility or are proven incapable in a conflict against a peer or near peer competitor like Russia or China? What is the point of sending these type of weapons to Taiwan if it's not going to enhance their security? It's to provoke China. That is the purpose of all of this. It's to provoke China. It is to fuel an armed conflict that the US can use to advance its own geopolitical agenda against China, which is to encircle, contain, divide, and destroy China, to eliminate it as a peer competitor.
Yes. And, this everything you said is on point. And I think one of the interesting things about this too is from the perspective of what's gone on in Ukraine. It seems like for NATO and the United States, what they've done is, they've created this it's been called a meat grinder before, but this counteroffensive, the casualties are so staggering. It does make me wonder about a Taiwan situation. If there was a conflict there, if they even tried a proxy conflict there, what kind of manpower issues would they have? Taiwan's a very small island, and it would have, the buy-in, right? The connections between Taiwan and China economically. What kind of buy-in would they have? Would the United States have in such a war? You would attempt to mobilize the several million people that live there, but at the same time, how long could that go on? Given that the situation in Ukraine, we're seeing what, upwards of 500,000 people dead or displaced. Those kind of numbers are staggering in and of themselves. The Taiwan situation seems like it would be even more, at least on a per capita basis, just like it would be like a massacre almost. Like what would happen if there was a conflict to spark there? But I'm wondering about what your assessment of that would be, just on the manpower level, the weapons themselves. If they fail, that just means more dead people.
Yes, and they most certainly will fail, because we're watching them fail right now in Ukraine. And I don't know what people think when they think about China in terms of its military capabilities, but it has similar, if not better, military capabilities in certain areas than Russia. In certain areas, Russia has the edge. In certain areas, the US still has the edge. But overall, we can see what the main deciding factor is in Ukraine. It's military industrial capacity, and no one on earth has more capacity than China. It's not even a close race. It's not even a close second. So just that alone, thinking about the type of conflict playing out in Ukraine, if that were to play out with Taiwan, with China's military industrial capacity, it's as you say, it would be a massacre. And I hope it never happens. And I hope that people living on Taiwan realize that they are going to be the next Ukraine, and that there's no benefit to them at all. I hope the people in the DPP understand that they're going to be the next Zelensky, and all Zelensky is the next. No one even remembers the names of the U.S. proxies in, say, Syria or in Libya or any of these other places. The U.S. has done this very same process. A lot of people imagine that somehow China is going to storm the beaches of Taiwan, when in reality, and again, even according to U.S. think tanks, they have the largest missile inventory on Earth. They would use missiles. They would use long-range missiles and air power to wipe out any military facility on Taiwan, on the island of Taiwan. And then they would use their ships, or again, also their missiles and air power, to blockade the entire island. Nothing will go in or out unless the rest of China says so. And when you add up all of that, it's going to be even worse than Ukraine, much worse. Ukraine still benefits from land borders with the rest of Europe. They're able to bring in all of this equipment. Even still, that you can see what the problems are over time. But for Taiwan, it wouldn't even be able to do that. It would not even benefit from these land borders that Ukraine has. So and then again, the United States acknowledges how hopeless this would be, which is why they need to sell to the American people and the rest of the world their direct and immediate involvement in any conflict that takes place within China over Taiwan. And so they would have to get involved immediately. And even that, they admit that they would suffer large numbers of casualties, American casualties, hundreds of warplanes, multiple ships, including 2 or 3 aircraft carriers, perhaps. So it would be a huge conflict for the U.S. They would suffer losses that they have not seen in the 21st century, and I would say that those estimates are a little bit too optimistic. I don't think they will do nearly as well. They're fighting a war crossing the entire Pacific right off the coast of China. That is China. That is to China's advantage.
Yes, indeed. And I wanted to ask you about, you made a comment on how the DPP is going to become the next Zelensky. And what's so interesting about this is that the DPP has kind of been in this position for a while now. It has represented the party of separatism, of so-called Taiwan independence. And the approach of Lai Ching-te is interesting. And I wanna just pull up. So Josh Rogan, the House neocon over at the Washington Post, immediately, he was actually at the stopover. He met with Mr. Lai Ching-te during. He says, "Why is China so afraid of Taiwan's vice president?" So, this is, unfortunately, Lai Ching-te is leading in the polls, but of course, the political manipulation that's gone on in Taiwan could very well be a big reason for this. But I want to just scroll down to how he concluded, because I think this is the psychological operation that is happening. And Lai is building his campaign on this statement, on these statements, saying that despite its lack of recognition, Taiwan is a democratic country with its own identity, politics, and culture. It was never ruled by the Chinese Communist Party. It never wants to be. These are facts that will endure whether Lai wins or not, and that's what truly worries Beijing. And if you read, he had an article in Bloomberg, an interview in Bloomberg, Lai Ching-te did, and he basically says these kind of things. He says, while we don't want conflict with China, Taiwan is independent. It's always called the Republic of China. It was never ruled by the Communist Party of China. And that is why Taiwan is already independent. So Lai Ching-te is already campaigning on this idea that Taiwan is independent because supposedly it's the Republic of China and is not governed by the Communist Party of China in the same way as its other mainland provinces. So to me, it's a complete distortion of history. But I'm wondering about your take on it, because it is very dangerous, given that the stopover was arranged by the United States. I mean, he wouldn't be able to do what he did if it were not arranged by the U.S. And he's speaking like this, and he has Josh Rogan, sipping tea with him. And this guy, he was the first guy to talk about China as the blame for COVID. He has been he's literally acknowledged by the establishment as like a resident neocon within the mainstream media. He's a war hawk, and he specializes in promoting hawkish stances on China. So, given all of this, what is your take on the direction that Lai and the U.S. are taking in terms of the political side of this, promoting Taiwan independence?
Again, people have to look at the history of the status of Taiwan to really understand it. The idea that the current government of China that does not rule over Taiwan, yes, it does. It's recognized by the UN. It's even recognized by the US officially. No, they don't have total control over Taiwan. And again, it's entirely a factor of U.S. interference, U.S. military and political interference. U.S. literally had thousands and thousands of troops stationed on Taiwan to prevent the civil war that the now Republic of China, they lost. They soundly lost it. They completely lost that civil war. The U.S. propped them up artificially by stationing U.S. troops there. And after they acknowledged the one China policy, they still used the U.S. military, its massive presence all across Asia, to protect these separatists, these remnants of this civil war that by all other measures should have been swept away and Taiwan allowed to fully reunify with the rest of China. If you look at Taiwan economically, it is it has reunified with the rest of China. It's dependent on the rest of China for its economy. And the vice president of Taiwan will find out very quickly if they decide to declare independence that no, you're not independent. You're not an independent entity in any shape, form, or way. Your economy will immediately collapse. Again, very similar to the way Ukraine unraveled and collapsed, although it'll be much, much worse for Taiwan. If people remember, after 2014, the new U.S. installed client regime in Kiev decided to start cutting all of its ties off with Russia. All of its cooperation ended. A lot of that cooperation sustained Ukrainian industry, military, industrial, aerospace industry, everything. And it all started to unravel and collapse to where it really doesn't exist anymore. The exact same thing will happen to Taiwan. They have the semiconductor industry, electrical component industry. Their largest source of imports are from the rest of China, and a lot of those imports are crucial inputs to these crucial, their largest and most important industries. So this is another fantasy world that the US has created, that their proxies in Taiwan live in, just like in Kiev. It is not reality. And eventually that fantasy world is going to collide with reality. It's going to be very unpleasant. Unfortunately, this very small handful of people that the US has built up over time in Taipei, they're going to bring the rest of Taiwan's population down with them. And they will also hurt the rest of China in the process.
Yeah, no, the situation is grim. We're talking about a grim situation in Ukraine, but these escalations with Taiwan, they're grim in the sense that the future, what the future holds, is indeed dark if the United States keeps going down. Well, what I believe, and I think many now are seeing is the suicidal path. It's surely going to destabilize everything economically, militarily, just globally, and it'll create just huge shockwaves that I don't think, just like I don't think NATO and the United States were prepared in Ukraine. They're not prepared for what would happen if a conflict were to ignite with China on this question.
Thank you for tuning in to my latest video. I appreciate all of your support. This channel, however, needs your help. I am seeking to make this channel more sustainable in the long term and upgrade necessary equipment to ensure that this work continues onward and makes progress to give you all of the geopolitical analysis that you all deserve. For that reason, I'm asking you to become a member of my Patreon community at patreon.com/DannyDhaiphong. You can find that link in the video description or in the pinned comment below. For whatever amount you choose to give, just know you are supporting independent media that you can't find anywhere else. Thank you so much, and I look forward to the next video.